third is Suarez. Goodell comes running in. He's under it, makes the catch. Here's the throw to the plate. It's in the air. He is out! Cameron Rick hangs on! Oh, man, what a play! Deep to right field. Way up there and way second
And welcome back to the Stupid Money podcast. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, honestly. We were talking that the way the Atlanta series went in the first game in Kansas City, it really looked like this was going to be another pretty negative episode, but they righted themselves a little bit, putting up 11 in back-to-back games in Kansas City. I did not see that coming. They held a pretty good Royals offense. I know it kind of falls off a cliff significantly after like the 4 or 5 guy, but like their 1 through 4 or 5 is up there with pretty much anyone with the way Bobby Witt's playing. So in the second and third game to just hold them 5 runs, I thought was huge too. I think that kind of flew under the radar just because of how many runs the offense put up. But we kind of talked about this last time, but I'd say pitching is 100% back, especially with Ranger back. Obviously, Taijuan Walker should never pitch for this team again. But outside of him, I'm comfortable saying pitching's definitely back.
I don't think I'm fully there yet.
Okay.
Ranger looked good. His first start back off the IL, but that was his first win since London. I know wins are kind of a dead stat, not necessarily, the proper indicator, but like his starts early in the season were him going 7 or 8 with, 1 or 2 runs, which again, you can't expect every time, but his starts early in the season were basically guaranteeing himself to get a win. Whereas, since London, it hasn't been the case. It's been 4 or 5 innings, which were very inefficient, and he's working around base traffic and everything. So I'm going to have to see at least another one. I'll say I have to see one more from him to be like fully confident that Ranger's back, just given who that one more is going to be against. I think he'll be in the Atlanta series. So
yeah, so he's going to pitch Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, if he goes to work against Atlanta again, I'll feel pretty good about where the pitching's at. The bullpen's definitely looked better. I think the wild card's obviously going to be Alvarado. Seeing where he kind of falls because, Banks is good. I don't know how I feel about him against like the big lefties in the National League. Strom seems to be, mostly back in terms of pitching how he was early in the year. So yeah, I think I'm definitely leaning that they're more back than not in terms of the pitching staff as a whole. But I'm gonna have to see a few more outings from, some of the more important guys to fully be confident with them moving forward. It really just comes down to what do they look like this week with, Houston, who the AL East is great, but realistically, like, I don't love the Yankees pitching and I don't love the Orioles pitching. So for me, it's the top dog in the American League. And then right after that, you have the Braves. So this is a big week for the entire pitching staff to kind of assert themselves that, they went through the midseason skid that is kind of expected in a 162-game season, and that they're kind of shaped back into form and can be trusted and start to iron out their roles for the final stretch run at the end of the season.
Yes, we brought up pitching. Kobe Allard pitched today kind of as a spot start thing they wanted to do. And because they won the series and they won today, it looks really good because now Zach Wheeler's pitching 2 games in this homestand against Houston and Atlanta, which, he does really well against Atlanta. Houston, not a huge sample size, but he was okay in the World Series. So that's huge that they were able to do that and be successful with it. That definitely helped a lot. But so I guess what I want to lead into that is Allard serviceable enough to take over for Taijuan Walker. I mean, obviously, we're not talking about playoff innings. We're not talking about anything like that. We're just talking about the next, 37, 36 games that are left. Is he the better option to make those? How many starts is that? 6, 7 starts?
It's tough because they've kind of been shuffling through these guys as Walker's been on the IL and Ranger's been on the IL. And like we saw with Phillips, the first, 2 or 3 starts were great. And then after that, it was, double the pain that Walker typically is. And then Allard's minor league numbers have been, mediocre this year. They haven't been particularly great. But then his major league starts have been, better. Today he gave up 8 hits, but he was, pretty effective in terms of staying out of the middle of the plate and hitting corners and everything. And his ball moves a lot in terms of the cut on the fastball. I'd probably prefer him over Walker, but the thing that I run into is like looking at Phillips, for example, like Walker's starts are consistently bad. You know what you're going to get, but like the guys that they've kind of had in this revolving door, the implosions have been much, much worse. And like Walker's starts are awful, but he'll give you at least 4 innings with, some of these Phillips and Allard starts. You're only expecting to get 4 or 5 innings, so their blow-ups give you 2 or 3, and then your bullpen's behind the 8 ball even more moving forward. I'd probably prefer Allard over Walker just because I'm over the Taijuan Walker name and like everything that kind of comes with it. So I'd probably just prefer one of like these minor league guys that it's like, okay, yeah, of course the journeyman didn't work, as opposed to watching the guy that they wasted $20 million on go out there and blow it up. I think that would probably make me less angry. So I'm fine if they start running Allard out there.
Yeah, and look, so the 5th spot's going to probably have 7 more starts in the regular season, and then when the playoffs come around, you don't even think about the 5th spot, obviously. If we could get someone who can at least make it where they go like 3 and 4 in those starts, I'd be happy. I think Allard can do that. Phillips, I think, maybe got figured out. That was really ugly towards the end with him. So I don't know if it would be him again. McAble has been better. For me, they'd have to have the division locked up.
Yeah.
Which we could talk about how that could possibly happen this week. And you could try him for a couple starts, maybe after that, and see if he gives you anything. I don't think there's a route for him to be on a playoff roster, but if they can get in a comfortable position towards the later part of September, maybe he could give you some innings that you don't have to give to someone that plans to be on your playoff roster then. So they're not at that point, obviously, because of the way they've played the last month or so. But if they get there, I think that's a route to take. With the offense, it's very hard to say things that are critical because of how the last 2 games went, and they weren't that bad on Friday. It's just Walker had them behind the 8 ball. But the double plays are crazy, especially with Trey Turner has like 4 this week, I think.
Yeah, he had 1 in 3 straight games, and then I don't think he hit one yesterday, and then he had another one today.
Yeah, I didn't watch the game today. I was at work, but a couple of them have been kind of rockets that no one's really beating out. He's not the fastest player in baseball anymore, but he's still up there. So you think he's a guy that's not going to get doubled up. A few of them have just been hit really hard, but like the one in Arizona, you're like, what the hell? I don't think he's running. And look, the stolen base numbers prove that he's not running. What I know he got hurt with the hamstring, but is that still a thing for him? Because it seems like it is, because he's not running the way anyone imagined since he's come back.
I don't know if it's necessarily the hamstring. It very well could be, but they showed a thing on the broadcast. I guess he had an RBI single last night, and he got down the line at like maybe, it was either 30 or 31 feet per second. It was his 5th fastest sprint speed of the season. So like it's still there. I don't know if it's him managing that and being passive and picking his spots when he has to do it because the hamstring's still like a little nagging issue. We've seen those in the past be something that lingers throughout the entire season, so it very well could be. But I think like everything about them right now is just like so wishy-washy in terms of one day the offense shows up, one day it doesn't. One day Trey Turner's getting doubled up on a ball that Gio Urshela has to take 6 steps past the foul line to turn to second, and
Yeah, that one was crazy too. Yeah.
the next day he has his 5th fastest sprint speed of the season. So it's like it's it just comes down to like it almost seems like they pick and choose their spots, which is just so weird because it's a slippery slope in the sense that you run into a lull like they had for the last 2 or 3 weeks where offense is really hard to come by, and every error that they make is kind of magnified because they're not hitting home runs. I think they went 5 games without a home run before JT hit one.
So they hit one like what the 6th or 7th inning on Sunday, and then they didn't hit one until JT hit one on Saturday, whatever inning that was in.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that was a while.
it's I don't know if it's the approach or what it was. I mean, a lot of the guys have been banged up off and on throughout the season. Turner is out a while, but they're far enough removed from their IL stints that you can't necessarily blame timing. The only one that you really could have said that for was JT because he was out for about a month and didn't do a rehab stint. So like he's the only one that really has the timing excuse. The Gelb wrote a report the other day that teams are kind of just like neutralizing them in the sense that they're not seeing fastballs. They're getting all off speed pitches, and it's so weird because we talked about it at the start of the season that they were the big focus was do what the Diamondbacks did in the playoffs, cut down on chase rate and stop trying to sacrifice like batting average or contact for power, and basically take a team that was kind of constructed for 3 outcomes: walk, strikeout, or home run, and turn that into more singles, more walks, less strikeouts. And then the offense was really good for the first few months, and then the last like month they completely got away from that philosophy and we're like, we're gonna chase every ball in the dirt, every curveball that's off the plate, every slider that's going away from us. And it hasn't been pretty in terms of the numbers. Marsh's strikeout rate is astronomical.
Yeah.
Harper is swinging at a lot of low sliders, even low fastballs, that it almost seems like they're just guessing. And they're like, okay, I got the pitch that I guessed. No matter where it is, I have to swing. Castellanos has kind of fallen back in the pattern of the low and away breaking ball in the other batter's box, especially on first pitches. Schwarber had like a bazillion strikeouts this week until the last 2 games he kind of got back on track. So I don't know if it's a lineup thing. You and I talked about it. We've been criticizing the lineup a lot, but we haven't really been giving any of the backlash to Kevin Long, who is kind of responsible for constructing these, philosophies or approaches. Obviously, guys have been in the majors, especially on this team, for 7, 8, 10 plus years. But
yeah, I was gonna say like Marsh and Stott, it's way more telling.
Yeah,
just because they've kind of come up with him. So to see them regress from both of them, Stott especially had a really good year last year, and Marsh was starting to come out of being a platoon player last year.
Yeah.
And now it's like Marsh looks like a platoon player again, and Stott's regressed. So those are the 2 guys I look at the most because they're the 2 that have come up with him.
Yeah, and I've said this before on here that it seems like he, again, going back to them being wishy-washy, there were times last year where, they'd really put an emphasis on taking pitches and working counts, which, would drive me crazy sometimes because they'd be sitting there watching fastballs go right down the middle on first pitches just for the sake of working account, which, is sometimes necessary. But then the next night, when it's, a Cy Young guy like Sandy Alcantara, who you want to get out of games, as soon as possible and make him throw as many pitches as possible. And they're swinging at, sinkers in on the hands, like right off the black, and sliders low and away. Like the philosophy since Kevin Long has been here has seemed to change from game to game. And I think we're seeing them kind of revert back to that, changing of how they want to approach at bats the last month or so when they've really been struggling.
Yeah, and so the struggles pretty much started right after they swept the Dodgers in Philly.
Mm-hmm.
I know you kind of talked about Turner like picking his spots. It kind of felt like they were done with the regular season after that series. Like they're like, okay, like where's the playoffs now? Like we're 30 games over 500. We just destroyed the Dodgers, who had astronomically high World Series odds to start the year. Like, let's get in October. And I think that's what screwed them, to where these lackadaisical approaches and stuff have come in. So I'd like to see them get out of it, and I think they are now. So we'll see. But now that I look back on it, that's really what it seems like. Just the way everything fell off a cliff, and there was not.
I mean, going back to that series, they have, I think, 4 series wins: the sweep of the Dodgers, the other Dodgers series that they won, the 4-game series with the Nationals last weekend, and then the series this weekend with the Royals. Obviously, the Dodgers are the 1 seed in the National League right now. I think they're up 2.5 games on us, or 2 games. And then
they win today. I don't know.
I don't know. But then the Nationals are the Nationals, whatever. Since they put out that dumb tweet years ago, we kind of just have their number. And then the Royals have been surging, and they're in the mix. I think they're in the playoffs if the playoffs started today in the American League. If not, they're very close to a wild card spot or the Central, because the Guardians have been struggling just as bad, if not worse, than we are. So like they're picking their spots, and they've played some good teams in that stretch for sure. We talked about what after the All-Star break looked like, but their 3 series wins, excluding the Nationals, are against, arguably the best roster in baseball and a team that's been surging since the second half with, an MVP, maybe the best shortstop season that we've seen in the history of baseball, and guys doing it around them too. Like the 4 series wins that they have are definitely not a joke. It's just everything else that's been mixed in between them that has been.
Yeah, and 2 of them are on the road, which is another part of that. Yeah, so this week though is kind of where it's time to put up. And side note, if the Guardians do win the Central, they probably owe the Phillies something, because that was 1 game lead on Friday, and then the Phillies won these 2, and the Guardians won both their games over the weekend, so it's back up to 3. So they're welcome for that. But this is a really big week, I think, because if it goes well enough, you can put the division behind you a little bit and start firing off after that seeding. Houston's red hot. The Phillies have lined up their pitching for it. You're going to get Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez for this series. And then Atlanta comes in again, and Michael Harris got hit on the hand today. I don't know the severity, but he, if it's something, he could at least be out this week. So you're not facing him. Ozuna was apparently limping today and had ice on his knee. Like, they're banged up, and I said this when we went down there, and they did not beat the Phillies because they hit the ball. They beat them because they absolutely destroyed the Phillies pitching wise, where the Phillies almost got like backdoor perfect gamed in 2 games, where like they retired like 18 in a row in both games at one point. Like, it was ridiculous. So I worry about how we are going to do with Atlanta's pitching again, because it seems like they have something on the Phillies that Arizona has, but no one else really has, because they were fine against the Nationals and they were fine against the Royals. It was the Braves where they looked bad again offensively. So we have to keep an eye on that. But if you win 2 out of 3 against Houston and then found a way to win 3 out of 4 against Atlanta, which the lineup's banged up, and I don't know how much longer Whit Merrifield, Gio Urshela, and Ramon Laureano can play at like an above average level. I don't think it's very long. So hopefully that cliff comes very, very soon, because I think they're all headed for it. But if that happens and you can go 5-2 this week, and your division lead goes from 6 to 8 with 8 or 9 with 30 games left, I think you feel good about that. And then it's like, what are the Brewers and the Dodgers doing? And it's going after them, and you have to go out to Milwaukee, but you get through this homestand on a high note. I think we're really good with seeing the light here, because what you have left is you have 6 with the Mets, which it's like whatever. They're very sporadic right now. They got 2 gifts from Sir Anthony Dominguez in the past week.
Yeah, I mean this
walk-off.
week for the Mets is huge because they just split 4 in San Diego and then they have 3 in Arizona.
Yeah, so if they get smoked in Arizona, and you have to watch though, we talked about this. If Arizona does really well in that Mets series, like they're up there for like the top seed then.
Yeah.
If they can get above LA, I don't know how many games they have against each other left, but so that's something to keep an eye on too. Obviously, we do not want to see Arizona. So that's another one to watch. But like after this week, it's 3 at Milwaukee, and then I think like 3 in New York and 3 here against the Mets. But outside of that, it's like a lot of Nationals, a lot of Marlins, a Rays team that's sold play. So Tampa sold, Chicago sold, Marlins sold, Nationals sold. Nationals though calling up Cruz and stuff. I'm a little interested to see how they look. That's the last series of the year, so I don't even know if that's going to mean anything. We'll see. But it's a schedule you could navigate in, and Toronto too, who kind of sucks, is in there too. So it's a schedule you can navigate in September. It's just really about this week. It's kind of your last big heave, facing good teams in a row, and it's at home. Your pitching's lined up. You just had a really nice offensive weekend. I think I know, like 4-3, we should be very happy. But I think if they could find a way to go 5-2 this week, we're in really good shape heading down the stretch, especially with the division. If you get 3 against Atlanta, you're gaining 2 games, which, depending on what happens during the week before that, would go to 8. So I think that's what you're looking to do. It really just comes down to this week, I think, and if we're going to sweat this division or not, because I think in a perfect world, you're not really worrying about the division, and then you're just hunting wins to get the 1 seed or the 2, at least the bye. We can talk about 1 versus 2 at a different time.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think the most important thing is the bye. The Astros series is all fine and good. Like I said, I think they're the favorite in the American League just off pedigree and, what those guys kind of have proven to do in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't know. Atlanta's obviously the one. Like, you have 4 games against Atlanta. You, at home especially, you cannot do worse than split if you have any intentions on putting a stranglehold in this division, because like I know you're kind of saying, if depending on how that series goes, they can kind of put the division to rest, but like 6 against the Mets in the last 16 games, we saw what happened in 07 with that kind of collapse, to say, for the Mets. Atlanta is ahead of the Mets by, I think, either a game and a half or 2.5 games today. this series is probably the biggest one that we've had in terms of a regular season series in how long between the last since we've kind of sprung back into the playoff picture the last 2 or 3 years. The division's been wrapped up by July, early August, if
Well,
anything.
I was gonna say 2021 late in the season when they went down to Atlanta and got absolutely decimated.
Yeah, I guess, but like, I don't know. That was
That's
like,
the only one I could think of.
yeah, but that was for Atlanta to clinch the division. But like, we weren't really in the division picture at that point in time. Like this one, you have a 4-game series at home with the last one being a primetime game on Sunday Night Baseball. Like, I know I'll be there on Thursday. I imagine that the games are already sold out. If not, they definitely will be. Like it will. It's essentially a playoff series this weekend, just because the they've had a stranglehold on the division. They've had their number for the Braves have had the Phillies number for the last 3 years in the regular season, and the last month obviously hasn't been good. And you went down to Atlanta and they're decimated with injuries, and you only gave up 8 runs in 3 games, but you only scored 6, and that was
Yeah.
missing the guy who's going to win the Cy Young this year probably in Chris Sale. I don't know if we get him this weekend. I'd find it hard to believe that we'd miss him if it's a 4-game series.
I'm pretty sure Phillies tailgate posted if the Braves didn't change their rotation, they actually would miss him again.
That's crazy. Well, if that's the case, then you definitely have to win 2. You should win at least 3. I know that they have other good pitchers, but I think our rotation as a whole is probably better, even though Lopez kind of mowed them down. They've historically hit Fried pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
This
Yeah,
week,
really quick. Sorry, Sale is expected to go Wednesday, so that means he wouldn't pitch the weekend. Yeah,
that's pretty lucky. But you've had a miserable month schedule wise, and then you're playing 2 teams that obviously have factored in the playoffs pretty well the last few years, and intend to do so again this year. This will be pretty much how I base my opinion on them the rest of the season. If they come out and lay an egg and go, 2-5 or even 3-4, I'll be pretty disappointed depending on what the 3 wins and the 4 losses are. But if they can go 4-3 or 5-2, I'll kind of just wash away the last month and chalk it up to the dog days in the middle of a long season and move forward with them, clicking on the right cylinders, not all cylinders, depending on what happens and what the wins look like. But if they can put together a good week that, looks like clean baseball, that they kind of figured out what some of the errors were, they'll be in good shape for the rest of the season, I think.
Yeah, this really is a really telltale week. It is. It's a lot of measuring sticks are in here. It's pretty much the 2 teams that our fan base absolutely hates too. Like there's so much around this week in this homestand. I think every game will probably be sold out. I think the weather's supposed to be really nice in Philly this week, Labor Day weekend. So I know some people will be away for like the start of college football over the weekend, but we'll see. Still should have pretty big crowds. And I'm hoping Schwarber and Harper started to hit better over the weekend. I'm really hoping they have a power surge in them. The 2 of them are really due to hit some home runs. If we get a week where the 2 of them each hit 4 home runs, something like that, JT finally got his power back, it looks like. If we get a week like that from those 2 where they each hit 4 home runs, I think we're going to have a really good week. But the pitching's lined up. We'll see what happens with Taijuan Walker. So the way they could do this is they could have Ranger go Thursday, even though I think they'd like to give him an extra day again if they could. But if they did that and you went with Colby Allard, you could do him on Friday, and then he'd have his 4 days off. So that could be the plan. I don't know if they want to move Ranger up, but I just don't see how you could let Taijuan Walker pitch against the Braves because you're pretty much, giving them a game in the division by doing that because you're going to lose most likely, and it's a full game in the division that just goes right out the window. So I don't see how you can let him pitch against Atlanta.
Yeah, if you're gonna pitch Walker this week, it has to be against Houston, I think. But the way that you have your rotation lined up, it doesn't really make sense to squeeze him in. I don't know if he's ever been on record or what, if it's really been a big deal about how Sanchez feels about an extra day of rest, but then you're kind of messing with the thing that you've already worked to set up. So I don't know. I'd rather Allard pitch against them just because it seems like the guys who have killed us this year or in the last few years. Obviously, you said Harris is a question mark.
Let me see if there's anything new on that.
I don't know if Albies will be back. Probably not. Kelnick's had a decent year against us, I think. He's obviously cooled off a bit since that opening weekend series, but he's had a decent year overall. Olsen always kills us, and he's a lefty. Ozuna kills us in Atlanta. He hasn't had great success, it seems, at Citizens Bank Park since he's been on the Braves, especially in the playoffs. So, obviously he's having, an MVP caliber year in the hunt for the Triple Crown. But I don't know if it's just because I'm scarred by Freddie Freeman, but when I see a lefty first baseman for the Braves, that's the guy that I kind of prioritize over anyone else.
Yeah, so it looks like Harris is day-to-day, so we'll see how that is. You could get hit and not miss time and it still greatly affect your play. A lot of people have mentioned that Bryce might have gone through that with his wrist
Castellanos
a couple weeks ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah, he did. He didn't miss any time really with it, but it still definitely affected him. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, I'm sure they'll hold him out. I don't even know who they play this week, but they'll probably hold him out of that to have him good to go for the Phillies series. So something to keep an eye on there, of course. But other than that, hopefully the Atlanta bullpen gets a lot of usage this week. That'd be nice.
Minnesota.
Okay, so it's decently tough.
In Minnesota.
I mean, we'll see. Hopefully Minnesota could play good then this week. That'd be big. It'd be really big if Minnesota could take 2 out of 3 and the Phillies took 2 out of 3 from Houston heading into that series.
Yeah, the MLBF has sale on Wednesday. Free Schwellenbach and sale.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. They got to hit that kid next time they play him too. That was ridiculous what they let him do. So hopefully, like I said, I'm banking on a power surge. Bryce and Schwarber are just absolutely due to hit home runs. Their power pedigree says they can't go this long without home runs. So I think we're going to get them in bunches when we get them here. Hopefully it's this week. We've talked about the power thing. It really is just 2 guys. If Trey hasn't hit a home run in a while either. I hit one on Sunday, so it's been a week.
I think Harper's 12 games?
It's a while. And Schwarber hasn't hit one since the Grand Slam?
Yeah.
Yeah, so these guys are due. And I just hope it comes in bunches. And
I know this week, I don't know who the last kid was, a name that I didn't recognize for the Astros, but
oh yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
Monday's Blanco, who's a righty, and Tuesday's Verlander, who obviously is a righty.
Yeah.
So a lot of righties coming up this week, especially if they miss Sale. Obviously Fried, but they all have pretty good numbers against Fried.
Yeah. So to back that up though, it's very important that Stott and Marsh keep up what they did over the weekend. Stott was 4-for-4 on Saturday, and Marsh had one of his best games from an at-bat standpoint, I think, on Sunday. A couple walks, a couple hits. And
he was 2 for 2 with 2 hits and 2 walks today.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so that needs to keep up with him. Just the strikeouts with him is the thing. If you could put the ball in play, because there were many times where he's come up in a big spot and a ground ball or a flat would have at least got them a runner, moved a runner over, and he just struck out on 3 pitches. And, it's just you can get out and still be productive, and he just wasn't doing that. And it seemed like a lot of big spots were finding him in those situations. So I don't care if you really get out that much, just don't strike out because it's very devastating, especially when you're not Schwarber, where you make up with it with a bunch of home runs.
Yeah.
Like Marsh's ceiling is probably 15 home runs a year. So, you're not going to hit 40 like Schwarber. So you got to strike out a little less. So that's just my big thing with him. And if Stock could get going, it's so important because then it gives you a lefty after Schwarber and Harper that he could put somewhere between 5 and 6 in the lineup and be productive. So really need him to get going. So if they get those two right after it kind of looks like they had a pretty good weekend, I think we'll be in good shape. But I'm saying it's got to be on the offense this week to get it done. I know they just put up 26 runs against. They faced 3 starters with ERAs in the 3s this weekend. They put up 26 runs, so maybe it's unfair to say that, but I think it's really on them, especially against Atlanta.
Yeah, agreed. Especially, I'm hoping that they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder after last weekend in Atlanta. Like 6 runs in 3 games is just unacceptable, no matter who you're facing. When they put this much money into a lineup, like you said, there were multiple stints in back-to-back games where they retired 14 plus in a row. Like that just can't happen. That just tells me that the quality of at bats is low, and watching the games, there weren't balls that were hit too hard in those games either, where it's like,
they struck out a ton.
14 in a row, but we just got unlucky. No, Ronaldo Lopez missed a month and a half on the IL, and he came back and got 10 strikeouts in 5 innings his first game back. Like, he's having a great year, but that just tells me that you're not really going up with a plan, and you're just kind of flailing.
Yeah, and needs to stop. All right, so we'll be back after this big week. Hopefully we're talking about a lot of improvements and a lot of wins. At least 5 would be nice. So if we can get that, I think we'll both feel good. So we'll talk then. I think it's either going to be a really negative or a really super positive one. I don't know, maybe in between. Well, I'll take the positive one. So we'll go with that, and we'll talk then.